Good morning, church. Welcome to St. Luke's United Methodist Church in our online worship service this morning. I'm Pastor Stephanie, and I'm so glad to be worshiping with you today. A couple of notes of announcement for our church family this week, and for anybody who would like to participate. We have a virtual coffee hour on Sundays through Zoom, which is an online video conferencing software. It's free. The coffee hour begins at 9:45 and runs until about 10:30, and it's just fun to see each other's faces. If you're able to get on, we'd love to see you on Sunday mornings between 9:30 and 10:45. Another opportunity for connection will be Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. is a Bible study that I'm hosting also through Zoom. That is through about the book of Philippians. So I hope that you will join me and others there as we connect with God and with one another. Today we have the joy of worshiping our risen Lord again. Our opening hymn today reminds us that no matter the tumult or the strife, there's always a reason to sing to our faithful God.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the clear, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It finds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? What though my joys and comforts die? I know my Savior liveth. What through the darkness gather round? Songs in the night he giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? The peace of Christ makes fresh my heart, a fountain ever springing. All things are mine since I am his. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth.
lesson this morning comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 13 through 35. On that same day, 2 disciples were traveling to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking to each other about everything that had happened. While they were discussing these things, Jesus himself arrived and joined them on their journey. They were prevented from recognizing him. He said to them, "What are you talking about as you walk along?" They stopped, their faces downcast. The one named Cleopas replied, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who is unaware of the things that have taken place there over the last few days?" He said to them, "What things?" They said to him, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth. Because of his powerful deeds and words, he was recognized by God and all the people as a prophet. But our chief priests and our leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped he was the one to redeem Israel. All these things happened 3 days ago. But there's more. Some women from our group have left us stunned. They went to the tomb early this morning and didn't find his body. They came to us saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who told them he is alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women said. They didn't see him." Then Jesus said to them, "You foolish people, your dull minds keep you from believing all that the prophets talked about. Wasn't it necessary for the Christ to suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then he interpreted for them the things written about himself in all the scriptures, starting with Moses and going through all the prophets. When they came to Emmaus, he acted as if he was going on ahead, but they urged him, saying, "Stay with us. It's nearly evening and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. After he took his seat at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. Their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he disappeared from their sight. They said to each other, "Weren't our hearts on fire when he spoke to us along the road and when he explained the scriptures for us?" They got up right then and returned to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying to each other, "The Lord really has risen." He appeared to Simon, and then the 2 disciples described what happened along the road and how Jesus was made known to them as he broke the bread. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. As a teenager, I was in our church's youth choir. And one thing that we looked forward to every year was our youth choir mission trip. All year long, remember I'm from San Antonio, all year long, we made and sold breakfast tacos on Sunday mornings to raise money for this trip. And they were really good breakfast tacos. I think they still do it. That's a lot of breakfast tacos to earn enough money for a trip. On these trips, about 35 youth or so, it's probably more now, and 5 adults traveled by bus, stopping along the way to sing in nursing homes and churches, to do service projects for communities that needed help, to learn a little bit about different parts of the country. One year we drove from San Antonio to Colorado, another year to Arkansas, another year to Tennessee and North Carolina. Some of our best times happened on the road. They were often the stories that got told and retold. Usually the most memorable events that bonded us together were the moments when something went wrong. One of the times that I remember most clearly is that when the brakes stopped working really well as we were going down the hills of Colorado, the mountains of Colorado. That same trip, I remember that the air conditioner stopped working on the bus as we were coming home in West Texas in July. And I can still remember the smell of that unair conditioned bus full of teenagers at the end of a mission trip. It was thick. Another year, we all bonded over accidentally leaving our friend Eric Higuchi behind at the hotel when we went to work at a church in Arkansas for the day. This was before anybody really had cell phones, and Eric had been waiting for us by the hotel pool, and he fell asleep and didn't have a room key with him. On the bus, we realized we didn't have him. We headed back from our work site to pick him up, and we came up with a song about how we forgot him. And I can remember every word of this song, and lucky you, I'm going to sing it for you right now. Remember, this was about 23 years ago, around the time when the movie Evita was made from the musical. And so the song went, "Don't cry for me, Eric Higuchi. The truth is we didn't mean to leave you there, all by your lonesome, without a key. No one to talk to, not even me." The things that happen on the road stay with us. The struggles, the mishaps along our journey teach us something. After we left Eric Higuchi at the hotel in Arkansas, we developed a counting system, and we never forgot anybody ever again. The road also gives us time to process what has happened. It gives us time to wonder about where we're going. It's an in-between place. Today's story from our gospel lesson happens on the road. It takes place on that first resurrection day. Now, there's a little something about these travelers that I think is interesting. A lot of translations will read, "Two men were traveling." But that's more of an assumption than a translation. What is likely is that the two traveling were actually a married couple. In John 19:25, it's written that Jesus' mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, stood near the cross. In the Gospel of John, Mary, the wife of Clopas, was one of the women at Jesus' feet while he was being crucified. And it's highly likely that Clopas is another form of Cleopas, which is the name that we read today. It could have been an Aramaic name that was transliterated differently in different Gospels. So Mary, the wife of Clopas, is likely Joseph's sister, because it would be strange for a family to have two daughters named Mary, and it would have been common to call a sister-in-law simply sister. So if these two on the road are Cleopas, or Clopas, and his wife Mary, they aren't just any set of travelers. They're not just any couple on the road. They're Jesus' aunt and uncle. And if these two on the road to Emmaus are the two who witnessed Jesus' death at his feet, then their despair is even more gut-wrenching. They watched their nephew die, the one that they thought would save them. That despair is the lens through which they were seeing the world at this moment in their journey. They thought that they had forever lost the one with whom they had trusted their future. They said, "We thought that he was the one to redeem Israel." They saw a crucifixion and then an empty tomb and were stunned in their grief. Now, I think it's normal that when we experience grief, we might have some of those same stunned feelings. We experience that kind of loss when we go back to the home of a loved one who has passed away and we feel their absence. We see the dent left from them in their favorite chair. We see their closet full of clothes that still smell like them. That kind of grief can overwhelm. That kind of loss can completely take over our ability to see clearly sometimes. These travelers, who were likely Jesus' aunt and uncle, were wading through the swamp of their loss as they walked back to the town, the village called Emmaus. And while they were talking to each other about everything that had happened, while they were discussing all of these things, Jesus himself just started walking with them. Now, here is where we would expect a joyful reunion, that great sigh of relief that we hear 2,000 years later. But instead of the joy, we read that they were prevented from recognizing him. It doesn't say that God prevented them from recognizing Jesus. It just says their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Something about their circumstances kept them from being able to see clearly that Jesus was right in front of them. Perhaps they were blinded by their grief, their anxiety about the future, their worry that maybe all of this was actually a lost cause. It makes me wonder how we are sometimes blinded by our own disappointment and grief, by the unsettling of circumstances. I wonder if you feel blinded by the fog of these pandemic groundhog days like I do. When Jesus spoke to this couple and they were still unable to recognize him, and he asked them, "What are you talking about?" And Cleopas replied somewhat snarkily, "Are you the only one who doesn't know what's happened?" And then they went on to tell Jesus everything that happened to him, everything that he had done, all about his death and even about the empty tomb. And then immediately it seems like there's this change, and Jesus begins to school them in the story of the Hebrew Bible, what we call the Old Testament. He reminded them of all the scriptures, interpreting the Hebrew Bible in light of himself, the Messiah. And so then when they came to Emmaus, this pair urged Jesus to stay with them. So he took a seat at the table, and presumably a table where they had had many meals together before. And when they sat down to dinner, and he took the bread and he broke it and prayed over it and gave it to them, all of a sudden they realized who he was, that Jesus had been walking with them through the fog of their grief all along. There's Jesus again, giving a glimpse of himself in the midst of doubt and suffering, giving a glimpse of victory and hope. I love that their response, as soon as Jesus disappears from their sight, and their response in this moment of awareness, of being awake to Jesus' presence with them, is, "Weren't our hearts on fire when he spoke to us along the road and when he taught us from the scriptures?" They understood Jesus by what they remembered. They remember what it felt like to be with Jesus with them, that their hearts burned within them. That kind of hindsight is pretty powerful. Their response to their remembering was to tell what happened to them. Right then and there at night, after dinner, they put their sandals back on and they headed the 7 miles back to Jerusalem because they had to tell the disciples. Remember what Cleopas said about Jesus to Jesus? They crucified him, but we had hoped that he would be the one to redeem Israel. Eventually, they would tell that story again and again, and the statement would become, they crucified him, and that was how he redeemed Israel. It was the resurrection that made all the difference. The grief and the disappointment that was initially clouding their ability to see the reality of Jesus with them, that would become an essential piece of the story of the gospel. It turns out that Jesus can break through our grief to give us hope. This week, I've been wondering, what is it that keeps our eyes from recognizing Jesus when he's right in front of us? What is it that keeps us from seeing signs of resurrection hope, signs of new life and new opportunity? What keeps us from recognizing those signs as Jesus' kingdom work? For me right now, it's trying to find a new normal in this season where so much of my life feels limited, or at least that's how I was looking at it before. I imagine that might feel similar for you too. We're all trying to wade our way through all of these super ordinary things of life in the midst of the most ordinary, most extraordinary of times. There's a book that I have recently pulled back off of my shelf. I am a bit of a a book collector, and this one is called, Tish Warren is the author, and it's called The Liturgy of the Ordinary. And in it, she goes through very ordinary life events and calls out what's holy about them. So a few of the chapter titles are things like brushing teeth, losing keys, eating leftovers, sitting in traffic. One is called Fighting with My Husband, the everyday work of passing the peace. Each chapter highlights the ways that Jesus can show up for us in the most ordinary of things, the ways that the most ordinary practices call us to the spiritual life. She talks about how each ordinary thing reveals the opportunity to experience and encounter resurrection hope. Perhaps if Jesus is revealed to us through ordinary things like taking a walk or eating bread, then maybe Jesus is also revealed to us even maybe more strangely through the moments of loss and failure and disappointment that seem to be becoming more ordinary now. The canceling of events. I've had days where going about the ordinary stuff, I've completely missed it. I've had days when I've been blind to the work of God happening right under my nose, when I've been impatient that things aren't the way that I hoped they would be. But in hindsight, I can see how Jesus was working there with me all along. In my father-in-law's backyard, there is a playset. And on the playset, there is a toy telescope. And most of the time, my youngest son looks through the wrong end of the telescope, making everything appear much farther away than it actually is. And I've heard it said before that Mary and Cleopas, who were walking on that road to Emmaus, were looking through the wrong end of the telescope, that they weren't able to see that Jesus was actually right there with them. This happened a lot after the resurrection. Jesus would show up and people closest to him even wouldn't recognize that it was him. They were looking through the wrong end of the telescope, trying so hard to focus on what was coming that they couldn't see what was right there. I wonder if we might be doing the same thing right now. This pandemic is, for me, illuminating the ordinary stuff. The days sometimes feel long. It seems like we have to eat and do dishes and eat and do dishes and eat and do dishes all the time. Or clean a room, and then before you know it, there's toys all over it again. And there are times when I found myself longing for the day when everything would just go back to normal. But I wonder if there's a new normal coming. I do hope and pray that there will be a time when community is gathered together in this space. I hope there's a day when we're not counting the number of feet between you and me. But I think that in this in-between time, we might be called to think about things a little bit more deeply. There's a pastor named Kirk Byron Jones. I think he's stationed or appointed in the Boston area, and I read something from him this week. He said, "The saving of this life on this side, is the savoring of life." So take a walk, go for a drive, call a friend, listen to the birds, watch the chipmunks. Savor the life, the glimpses of resurrection hope that are right in front of us. Mary and Cleopas recognized Jesus when they stopped to savor the bread together. We are on a strange road right now, and we don't know how long the road is. We don't know where exactly it will lead. But we can still have our eyes open, ready to spot Jesus among us even now. It's in the savoring of life that we will recognize the Savior. Thanks be to God. Amen. As we remember those in our congregation today who are in need of our prayers, I would invite you a couple of things. First, to fill out the online registration form that came in your email, and it's also located on our website. There you can list if you have a specific prayer concern that you would like me to know about. I also want to name for you a couple that I know for sure I can share with you today, and that the first is that Carol Clark, please pray for Carol Clark in the death of her sister Donna. Donna passed away on Wednesday of this past week at age 91. So please pray for all who love Donna, especially for her husband of 72 years as he grieves this loss. I'd also ask for you to continue to pray for those who are on the front lines of this healthcare crisis, those serving in healthcare, those serving at the grocery store and small businesses, anybody that continues to need to work during this time. Please pray for them. And I also want to share with you that today, if things had been normal, today would have been Confirmation Sunday. And so I'd ask you to pray for our 8 students who have been so resilient through this season, who've moved their confirmation classes to Zoom calls every Wednesday, and who are wading through their own kinds of disappointment. But we will celebrate them when we are able to do that again, to gather again. Today, instead of a traditional pastoral prayer, I want to let our prayer be this next hymn. The text and the melody have been my prayer this week, and I hope that they bless you.
Stay with us till night has come. Our praise to you this day be sung. Bless our bread, open our eyes. Jesus be our great surprise. Walk with us, our spirits sigh. Hear when our weary spirits cry. Feel again our loss, our pain. Jesus, take us to your side. Walk with us, the road will bend. Make all your weeping, wailing end. Wipe our tears, forgive our fears. Jesus, lift the heavy cross. Talk with us till we behold a joyful life you will unfold. Heal our eyes to see the prize. Jesus, take us to the light. Stay with us till day is done. No tears, no dark shall dim the sun. Cheer the heart, your grace impart. Jesus, bring eternal life.
Friends, as you continue to connect with people in your church family and to connect with God through this time of worship, I hope that you will consider also continuing to give in the ways that you are able. God has blessed us so deeply, and we know that there are people in great need. So the church continues to serve our community as we are able to, and I thank you for the ways that you've continued to give from your gifts to support this place. Now let us sing together our closing hymn, In the Garden.
talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. He speaks, and the sound of his voice is so sweet, the birds hush their singing, and the melody that he gave to me within my heart is ringing. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he calls me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I'd stay in the garden with him, though the night around me is falling, but he bids me go through the voice of woe, his voice to me is calling. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known.
Friends, go in peace and serve the Lord, and may our lives be a witness to the love of God. Amen.